Welcome back to another episode of The Power of Your Story, a space for people to share their story, learn from their story, and ultimately empower others through that story. Before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to make a few quick announcements, and that is if this is your first time tuning in, or if you've been tuning in on all of the previous episodes that we've had to this particular point, please feel free to leave us your feedback and your comments, as some of the people that are doing right now who are joining the show. Because at the end of the day, even though it's the two of us here, myself and the guest that I'm going to introduce in 1 minute, that may start the conversation, at the end of the day, we're only limited to what we know and how we view the world. So whatever questions, whatever insights or personal experiences that you have in regard to this topic of disability, please feel free to share them in the comments. The second announcement that I wanted to make is in regard to this show, and that is if you've enjoyed what we've been able to put together to this particular point, please consider leaving us a review on LinkedIn or Facebook. We'd greatly appreciate it, and that would help us tremendously in spreading the word even more about some of these messages. Today's theme and today's topic is something that I've been curious to have a conversation about, and I figured that there truly was no better individual to have a conversation with than a mutual friend and a connection that I was very fortunate to make through the power of LinkedIn. I feel like at this point it's become second nature to say that, just all the different people that I've met. Her name is DeeJae. Her and I connected a couple weeks ago and instantly were able to relate to each other's stories, backgrounds. And so I figured that what better way to continue the conversation than to bring it to all of us and be able to share this dialogue. Once again, this topic that we're going to cover today revolves around the concept of disability and the stigmas around it, perceptions. So if you have any comments, any feedback, anything along those lines, please feel free to join us and leave it in the comment section from wherever you are joining. Now, let's get back to the show. There she is. How are you?
Hi. Hi. Thank you, Oleg.
As you could tell, you already have some fans in the building here. Melody said she's awesome, and Adam has joined us as well, looks like. And I'm grateful that we're able to connect and have this conversation for a couple different reasons. I think on a slightly unrelated note, this morning I was playing basketball with some of my friends here in Austin, and we're talking about stigmas, in particular stigmas to masks. And we found that it was interesting how in starting the pandemic, it was kind of like everyone wear a mask, or you're looked upon as X, Y, and Z individual. And now it's like the complete opposite. Now some of these places that are loosening up the rules and restrictions and regulations, it's not the same thing. So it's interesting to observe, and that's why I'm curious to explore this topic as it relates to disability, but stigmas. Like, how do those judgments really impact one's perception, and is it even possible to move past it, or will those things always exist for what they are? So I'm grateful that we can have this conversation. And I figured the best way that maybe we can even tackle the topic at hand is taking a step back and sharing something that you actually had shared with me offline, and that is your own introduction to the concept of disability. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about how did you come across it, what was your personal experience, and then how did it impact your own world in knowing that?
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, Oleg. Really, just your background and everything that you represent is really an honor for me to be a guest. So thank you.
No,
And
thank you.
that is very powerful. So disability really started early in my life because of a traumatic incident with my father. My father was in a car accident when I was in middle school. seventh grade, and he was traumatic brain injury. He had to learn how to walk and talk and just everything all over again. Just very serious. Whoever he was with, the gentleman that he was with, did perish in the accident. Young man, young father at that point. So my father was very fortunate to make it. He had everything just, collapsed lung, brain swollen. I couldn't recognize him. So that was really the
Mm.
first beginning for me to start a new life. Our life changed when the provider, your father, which I was raised by my father and my stepmother. So for me, that was my biological parent that I
Mhm.
now losing in a sense. So, and we'll talk a little bit about in an episode that I shared on my own show. We talk about traumatic brain injury and how that
Mhm.
affects their personality, who they are. So, my father's personality changed from that traumatic brain injury, and life was different. So now we struggled with a whole new set of barriers. He really didn't realize how much it affected me until actually later on in life, but it really captivated me how my father changed and how everyone else had to change along with him, to be able to provide him what he needed to get better and be able to cope and everything that comes with that. So it was just really, um, it just changed everything. So with that, I got really involved in psychology. I was curious through high school about psychology and people and why personalities are and people think the way they think. So joined the military, try to get to college, get my way paid to go to school. My uncles were in the military. So for me, that was really important to represent
Mhm.
and be part of that. And if not, just do it in the name of my father as the oldest. So I wanted to go and, make something different happen, change that again, take that into my own hands and see what I could do with it. So it was just really learning that, but I always knew I wanted to go back to helping people with disabilities. So when I got my degree and I finished up my military service, I went right back to working with individuals in group homes and never looked back. Just working one on one with people with disabilities in the communities and various social systems. It's really opened my eyes to all the stigmas and all the stereotypes and all the barriers that they endure day to day,
Mhm.
constantly. If it's not, constant doors being shut and just being sidelined. So it's really difficult when you work with individuals that are constantly oppressed, shamed, and not given fair opportunity and equity
Mhm.
in their lives.
How
No fault of their own, usually.
yeah. How do you in looking back at just all of the experiences that you've had to this point in working with individuals of different disabilities, how would you say that impacted your own lens and perspective? I mean, were there times so I'll share a story with you. When I was younger, be I didn't understand some of these topics as well as I understand it today. And I'm not going to say I necessarily judged anyone or anything, but there were certain conversations I felt that I couldn't even have because I didn't have that common ground or common understanding. And
Mhm.
you're spot on, so much stigma that was built around the concept of disability to begin with, where I didn't even know if that's a topic that I should bring up over the course of a conversation. And so
Mm,
because of it, I refrained from asking questions because I didn't want to offend. I didn't want the other person to, as I was perceiving it, to go through even more of a challenge. And then it wasn't until a couple of years ago, I had a conversation with someone and I said, hey, just upfront, I don't know anything about it, but I would like to know what the world looks like through your lens. And it was through that moment, the person literally said, A, he's never been asked that before, and B, he was able to share. And so I'm just wondering, in your field of work, having done what you have, how did that impact your own world? Did it change it completely? Like, who were you before you essentially came into this reality, so to speak?
I well, I feel like that reality has generally been a part of my life
Mhm.
overall since young because of my father being exposed to that and having to learn how to be, a child of someone that has a disability. I have my own disabilities as well, so I don't want to, not say that I don't because I do,
Mhm.
physical and mental. So I I'm open about that I have my own. And there shouldn't be a shame. It shouldn't be a stigma on that. I think that all those perceptions, now we're talking historically about individuals that have been, oppressed, right? Institutionalized,
Mm-hmm.
not that long ago. People that didn't have any rights according to the law and really had to fight for rights, for that equality to be, acknowledged. Just all the barriers that were there, weren't, whether it be like buildings and transportation, access to services, education, opportunities to go to school, and be part of their communities.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that has always just been a big part of like me wanting to share compassion and show others how to be compassionate towards those. So you brought a good point. And sometimes we don't know how to talk about it. Like, how
Mm-hmm.
do we ask? And it's really simple. You just ask, right? You just say, "Hey, how are you doing? How can I help you?" It's just asking them, "How can I help you?" It's also important to know, like, not to just jump in and touch hands on. So if you see
Mm-hmm.
someone that may have a disability that is trying to do something, instead of like trying to just grab them and help them with something, always ask first. And you can always start a conversation just like any other normal person. How are
Mm-hmm.
you? How are you doing? Oh, I whatever it is, right? Find a way to compliment and start that conversation. Show that you're open to learning or wanting to know a little bit more of what they're going through.
Mm-hmm.
Conversation going, someone might be hearing that next to you, and it kind of inspires them to also move that forward.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's why these conversations are so important. It just gets individuals to understand that there are other people that do understand and advocate for their needs and their dignity and their equal opportunity that they deserve. It's been very difficult, right? Just because of the history of
Mm-hmm.
someone with a disability coming from just
Different
absolute
areas. Yeah.
shunness, being shunned in society
Mm-hmm.
and just hidden, tucked away.
Mm-hmm. Was it a challenge for you to accept your own disability?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I think that for me, yes, and I think that that really goes for many of us. I feel that it can be very difficult for anyone to kind of come to terms. You get that little choking feeling, like, this
Mm-hmm.
is something that I have to come to terms with. I think that's something I also talk about on my show is acceptance for others, but acceptance within yourself. Because that's really a big step. And it's just like anybody that may have a mental illness or they don't know how to get help. They want help. Having those conversations, letting them know it's okay to get help. It's okay to talk about it and share. It's just so many different things that those stigmas really unfortunately contain
Mm-hmm.
conversations and don't allow people to get what they need and to be validated.
Yeah. Well, I'm a huge believer. I think when it comes to conversations, if anything that I've learned, it is that everything does start with a conversation, or having
Mhm.
the ability to ask questions, or I think
Yeah,
more importantly, maybe even create a space for the other person to really be accepted for who they are and how they are, and not necessarily have to be any more than that before a conversation can take place. And so I like that you mentioned that, and I thoroughly enjoy the different live broadcasts that you do around some of these topics, because you're right. Many of these topics, unless I've kind of started approach it through the lens of, instead of waiting for the change to happen, be the change. So if there's a conversation that's not being had wherever it is, have that conversation. Start that
right.
topic, find that person. So it's
Yeah.
interesting how you do the same exact stuff through your work, and then we're having this conversation about it. And I'm curious, as you were sharing
Mhm.
this topic of acceptance, in particular to your own journey, do you remember what that was like? Like, who was the first person that you kind of had that conversation with, if you can recall, and saying, hey, I'm thinking of maybe doing something in the field of X, Y, and Z, and just more so hearing, I don't know, maybe almost hearing yourself out, or letting the other person hear you, like.
I think it was more for the voice of the others. For me, I
Mm-hmm.
was compelled for others to share their stories, others to get the information out of what they were going through. It wasn't about me, and And it's been very hard for me to admit I have a disability and, like all the gray stuff that goes in there. But I wanted to touch on something
Mm-hmm.
about conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And even I get nervous about having those conversations when I have to talk about traumatic brain injury or bipolar or neurodiversity. I don't know everything and every topic that I'm about to have a conversation on, but that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't, I don't want that to stop me from learning and growing. And if I'm having that conversation on air and I make a mistake, it's okay. I can be corrected. It's a teaching moment and I welcome those teaching moments. And you want to set the example for
Mm-hmm.
others. So, I mean, right. The topics that I talk about are not the easiest and they're not the most welcomed.
Yeah.
So, to have those conversations and then really make them important and powerful and really to help others understand that we're just all humans and we all have these stories inside. We just need to share them
Mm-hmm.
because the shame and the shame behind it really puts people in isolation and to hide. And the statistics show that many of us have disabilities. Many of us. One in four, one in five. Again, with mental health, the same thing, those same kind of numbers. I don't talk too much about statistics, but just to understand that it shouldn't be anything that we're ashamed of, and we shouldn't judge others for that. We should uplift each other and find ways to continue to help each other with access to services, more knowledge, more information, knowing your legal rights,
Mm-hmm.
understanding where the law protects you, because it's an uphill battle. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've been through some intense conversations online, offline, and it's always going to be I don't think that the stigma is just going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
There's really just so much to to continue to advocate for. So, I mean, I don't want to dig too deep into like specific things, but I'm going to leave it a little bit more broad in general.
Of course.
Yeah.
Ta- Taking a step back, actually, on the whole topic, how do you view disability? What does a disability mean to you to begin with?
So to me, I use just the standard term of something that impairs you in some sort of aspect in your life, right? Whether it be one of your senses, it be your thinking, your processing, it be your emotional state, your physical impairments can also be classified as a disability. And
Mm-hmm.
again, disability doesn't have to be something that Social Security here in the US, something that Social Security um, tells you you are. This is something that you have to choose for yourself. If you have that, if you qualify, if you feel like you have an impairment in your life that is, hinders you to be able to do all the other tasks, right? At that. And then we haven't even touched on accommodations, but that's
Mm-hmm.
part of it is coming forward to say, hey, I do have a disability. Not only that personal acceptance, but then how do you voice what you need? No one knows what you need but you.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be able to advocate for yourself. You have to really be comfortable with acknowledging your disability and then how do you voice it even if it's not recognized by any government entity. I'm for your own self to be
Mm-hmm.
successful, to be able to really continue to move forward towards what you want. So removing stigmas and helping others remove their barriers, it really just for me is important. That way it we can be just collectively as a society, change that attitude. I
Yeah.
think that really needs to be some attitude changes when it comes to how we work with, assist,
Mm-hmm.
uh, provide information to, whether it be digital information, electronic information, to individuals that have impairments, visual impairments, hearing impairments, physical impairments. All of those count. It's already hard enough when you're limited in some way like that, in some capacity. And then to just constantly have the door shut or be told you need to wait, not right now, you can just go over there. It's difficult and it's really, for me, it's so sad.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes me want to like really continue to advocate and
Mm-hmm.
and and let others know that I hear their their frustration. I hear what they're going through, their pain, and how they're not really given those fair chances like most of us are. For me, I don't look like I have a disability, so I
Hmm.
may be given an opportunity a lot faster than somebody that may look like they have a disability, right?
Hmm.
Based on that physical
Physical presence,
component,
yeah. Do you
right?
find that one of the things I've been curious about when it comes to disabilities, I think in particular, is, for example, in not having or not having the ability in one particular way compared to the other. Do you find that in your case, in having a disability in one area, does it enhance some of the other abilities because you no longer focus the time and energy on that one thing that you can't do? Like, how does that actually work
Good
on your end?
question.
Because I've always wondered, like, okay, if I can't see, do the other things, other senses get enhanced up much more because I no longer have to focus? Because one of the things I experience is having to focus and split energy amongst everything simultaneously, almost like in an equal fashion. But if I don't have one of the things, how does that work?
Right. And everyone's different again. So
Mm-hmm.
everyone has their own way of managing and getting through their challenges. I want to say thank you to the chat. The
Mm-hmm.
chat is fantastic. So thank you, chat. But yeah, I mean, there's just so much out there that it's personal, right? It really starts with your own personal. What do I need? How do you view it within yourself? How do you express it to others? How do you deal with society and then the way they see you and in that form, in that shape, and all that goes with it, with the judgment. So it's so difficult. I I don't know. Let me look at my notes too because I know there's something that I wanted to
Of
talk
course.
about. We talked about the shame, being kind and not knowing what to say, compassion. Oh, perceptions. I think perceptions have a lot to do with the perceptions on the media
Mm-hmm.
and TV, what we've generally seen. And really, when you share your story or you are changing the perspective, hopefully. That's something that I personally find important in the show is changing the face of what you thought it was to understand, oh, that's not that diagnosis, quote unquote, or that disability or that trauma, but that's that person. That's
Mm-hmm.
my friend. That's a speaker. That's a person. I'm going to say it
Mm-hmm.
again.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because again, that chips away at those stigmas. Oh, well, I thought ADHD looked like this. Oh, I thought that disability looked like that. Oh, I thought bipolar was like this. So again, just the more and more we continue to have those conversations and help each other with language. Language is so important. So
Mm-hmm.
educating and then how do we change our language? Not using diagnoses, not using the disability like that language first, right? We always talk about person centered, person first language, right?
Mm-hmm.
Person, then the challenge, not the challenge, not the
Than the
diagnoses,
person. Yeah.
person. So just
Yeah.
help people understand and be aware, and that if you make a mistake, it's okay, but you know, be mindful. Like that's how it starts. Is language is a big one to
I
help.
think that's a really good point because it reminds me of a similar thing that I've personally started to do, and I know some of the other people who have joined us here, such as Brian, Lachelle, Melody, Adam, and that's really choosing to acknowledge the person first. And also knowing that this is a friend of mine has kind of embedded this in my brain. So at this point, I have no other way to look at it but that way. But he really reaffirmed me that in choosing how I view other people, I get to project the meaning. And so
Mm,
in that particular case, I project the meaning onto things and individuals. And so whatever the labels I choose to associate with them, it is the choice that I make. Therefore, I believe in a conversation like that, change, in my opinion, really does start with you. It starts with you as an individual, and everything as far as the resources and stuff. not always believe, but recently begin to believe that they're always there. And so it's a matter of, is one willing to take the time and the energy and the willingness to seek out some of those resources and conversations that might help with that language and understanding of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so it really does start with you, and I'm glad you said that. We're in control of ourselves, what we say, how we project these stigmas, how we continue to or uplift others, right? So all that language makes a difference, especially when you're out in public.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important that you want to help others, encourage that. For me, that's my message, right? Is just
Mm-hmm.
helping others understand that they're not alone. Everybody's going through things in that sense, and there's we're not all what we look like, right? It's not just about
Mm-hmm.
the exterior and the accomplishments and all that, but there's always so much more deeper inside someone. And really, for me, that's where I enjoy the work that I do, is going down to those other deeper levels to really help individuals find their inner strengths and not be so taken by all the constant negativity of the stigmas and the stereotypes that they've been faced with, all the
Mm-hmm.
constant shut doors and denials. Finally, to hear a yes, or hey, maybe I can help you with that, or oh, we'll find a way. Being creative is also a great way to help with you know breaking stigmas, because when someone has a disability and you ask them, oh, tell me a little bit about your disability, how can I help you, how can I make it something a little bit more accessible to you? That's such a simple question. How can I make something a little more accessible to you? It really just helps, right? Chipping away at the stigmas of what you expected or
Yeah.
what you thought it was.
Yeah. And that, I think, goes directly to Melody's point, and that's, plus we do have to stop putting ourselves and others into a closed box that no longer has value. We all have a purpose, and struggles can become a main ingredient of our purpose.
Ooh, nice.
I It's such a great point, because I think for me, I've realized that along the way, that in that struggle, within those pain points, there truly was a purpose. Now,
Hmm.
it took me, I don't know, 8, 10 years to articulate that purpose and really understand it. And more importantly, I think, act upon it. But that's the biggest thing that I've realized is, in my opinion, and I'd be curious to hear your perspective on this, but I believe that everything does happen for a reason, as long as I choose to give it a reason. Do you believe in a similar thing? Like, do you believe there is a sense of purpose within, maybe not every hardship or every form of suffering, but the ones that you've at least come across?
Wow, I didn't prep for this question. This is a good one. Give me a couple minutes. Ask it again. Let's go. Let's start over on this question.
Do
Let
you
me
think that there is a sense of purpose within any hardship?
I think it adds to our purpose. I think
Mhm.
it gives us extra skills, extra creativity. That goes back to
Mhm.
some of the bits and pieces of the conversation earlier.
Mhm.
So having to overcome so much stigma, so much disability, so much barriers, you have to be creative. You have to kind of come up with a way to keep moving forward and building on your purpose and knowing your purpose and using what you have around you,
Mhm.
whether it be um, parts of that disability, right, that can give you actually extra skills. You
Mhm.
find ways to use your strengths, and that's something I talk about as well, is finding your strengths, work on your strengths. We could sit and talk about diagnoses, medications, hospitalization, surgeries, but really focusing on the strengths and how you have those and you use those to move forward and what is it, use those to your advantage,
Yeah.
right? Like
Mhm.
really, you know, that's, I think, for me, is really important. That's one of the things that I also like to work with and help other people's understand. Like, let's change the conversation towards the strengths. What are you good at?
Mhm.
How can we make it?
Mhm.
What are you good at? It's so
Mhm.
simple. What do you like to do? Let's make that really like part of your life, where you get fulfillment and value and wholeness and worth.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think there is a time and a place. I like that you bring that up, because I think there is a time and a place in being able to, what some call the victim mindset, be in that. I've been there, and it's not to say that I don't continue
It's
to
hard.
be there. I think there are situations that come up, but I like the point that you made as far as, well, what's next? Yes, this thing happened, and yes, I've been dealt whatever hand, but at the same time, what can I do with this hand moving forward? And
Yeah.
how can I possibly reshuffle some of those cards and get a new set? So I think it's a for me, it's been a very valuable technique in understanding that even though there's a time and a place for feel bad or ask myself, why did this happen? Or I can't believe this happened. Those are all real feelings. And that's the
Mhm.
thing that I had to acknowledge throughout my own journey, is that those are real thoughts. And so in actually not acknowledging them, I was doing myself more harm than good, because I was suppressing a lot of those emotions and, slowly transitioning. It's like, okay, this happened. I got to get through it. But I didn't
Mm.
really understand that, not necessarily why did it happen, but how does it make me feel that it happened? And what can I do with it? More important than moving forward. So I love that point that you brought up about finding your own strength and identifying your own weakness, or not weakness, uniqueness, through your own story.
Yeah, nobody can do it for you. Nobody can do it. And the victim mentality, the comment that you made, is something that is very much something that is part of that conversation with the stigmas. And that's unfortunate that people, you know,
Hmm.
think that, because they don't think of what those individuals have to go through to just be able, right? That able
Yeah.
to do what someone can do just so simply and so quickly, like getting up out of
Hmm.
a chair, going to the restroom, feeding yourself, doing
Hmm.
household chores, going up a set of stairs,
Yeah.
just basics, going to the grocery store.
And the other thing that I think you pointed out a couple times is, when it comes to it, I'm curious to hear that when it comes to stigmas, how do you understand what they are? Is it judgment? Is it misunderstanding? Is it something completely different to the two of those?
Wow, Oleg, you're
And
trying, you're
then
trying.
this is a question for anyone else as well that's tuning in right now. Feel free to put in the chat. But that's one of the things I'm trying to understand, is when it comes to those stigmas, where does it really come from? Because I was sharing with you earlier, when we were starting this conversation, when I was having a conversation with a friend of mine about some of the stigmas that we have around masks. So before, the stigmas were around, everyone who didn't wear a mask or who had to wear a mask, and now it's the other way around. Now you walk in and everyone still wears a mask, but you are not required to wear a mask. So it's interesting how the roles have reversed, but I never
Right.
fully understood, like, what is that stigma? Where does it actually coming from? Is it misunderstanding, or is it just blatant judgment that, you know, you think
I
you're somehow better than me, or you know more than I do? So I just never fully understood that.
I think it's definitely comes from different levels, right? So there's like society as a whole,
Mhm.
how it's portrayed in society and media, something we touched on, how conversations are had, how language is used. Um, and then it goes to a personal level, what we've been taught to think and look at it, right?
Mhm.
Were we taught to be biased towards it? Were we taught to think that, oh, look at that person, and taught to, right, not be kind?
Yeah.
Lack of a better word. So
Mhm.
really there's just so many levels, right? So you have to think of how what you've been taught and what has been brought onto you by your environment, and then you think of where the society as a whole and the culture as a whole, and how has the culture embraced that. So I mean, here in America, USA, obviously we, people with disabilities were institutionalized, they were hospitalized, they were, again, locked away, not to be seen, not to be, and
Mhm.
really they've had to fight for their legal rights to have opportunity and to be seen and receive services just like everyone else. So I think,
Mhm.
society, and then the mentality of individuals, and continuing to perpetuate that is unfortunately something we have to continue to work against. Look at, I mean, laws and legislature, and the lack of implementation of law.
Yeah. DJ, obviously you and I can have this conversation for however long because there's so much to unpack within that. But for anyone that's tuning in right now, what are some ways that people can connect with you, learn more about your work, anything that you're doing in this world?
Oh, thank you. So you can connect with me. Yes, LinkedIn, that's my preferred platform. Just send me a message if anybody wants to connect with me. I also appreciate any support on my YouTube channel. It's the same handle, Silver Fox Talks, really simple. And of course, Twitch. I like to stream to Twitch. But to really connect with me, LinkedIn is the preferred platform. You can find all my contact information on
That's
there.
awesome.
Thank
And
you.
we'll make sure to share that. And for anyone else that's tuning in, just thank you so much for being a part of the show. And if you enjoyed any parts of it, please consider leaving us a review on Facebook or LinkedIn. And just outside of that, I just want to thank all the people that were able to be a part of it. Melody, Dorothy, someone actually, you connected the two of us, and I'm looking forward to that connection.
That'd be great. Yes.
James, Adam, Kenny, so many others. Like I said earlier, the two of us, we might be able to start the conversation and explore some of these topics, but truly, it's all the other people that choose to be a part of it. That's what makes it special. And I think, if anything, that's what makes it more feel like a genuine community of people who support and believe in you. And so I wanted to thank everyone that's been a part of this. And I want to thank you, DJ, for choosing to be here and sharing who you are.
Thank you, Oleg.
Oh, thank you.